Good morning. My name is Lucille LePage. I'm serving as today's worship associate. Anthony. My name is Lucille LePage, and I'm serving as today's worship associate. Can you hear me now? Okay, thanks. A warm welcome to all of you joining us today at the Gloucester Unitarian Universalist Church, whether you're here in person or watching on YouTube. A special welcome to all the visitors and first-time attendees. It's wonderful to see you. This congregation has been meeting for worship for almost 250 years. As a welcoming congregation of the Unitarian Universalist Association, we welcome here the full inclusion of all people, including all sexual orientations and gender expressions. Whoever you are, wherever you are in your life journey, we're so happy that you're here with us this morning. We have just a few announcements for you before the service begins. The wonderful Music on the Green summer concerts, which are presented here, rain or shine, each week, continue on Friday evenings from 6 to 8 p.m. through September 5th. This week's free concert features the Middle Eastern band High Fusion, with goodwill offerings going to Grace Center and food available from Mark Cook. The selection for the next book discussion is James. It's a reimagining of Mark Twain's Adventures of Huckleberry Finn from the perspective of the runaway slave character, Jim. The discussion group will meet on Tuesday, September 30 at 3 p.m. That's September 30. So you have plenty of time to read the book before then. Again, it's Jim. It's James. And I don't have the author here, but it's a current book. Reverend Janet will be on vacation until August 22nd, and she will also be on study leave from August 25th to 29th. Also, our church administrator, Christine Norris, is working a summer schedule of 10 hours per week and will be in the office on Thursdays and Fridays for the next few weeks. If you'd like to get in touch with Reverend Janet when she returns, or if you wish to learn more about church life in general, please fill out one of the yellow cards on the backs of the pews, and then you can just drop the yellow card into the collection plate at the offertory. Holly has an announcement.
Hello, I'm Holly Tangway. Next Sunday, I will be leading a poetry service on the themes of fear and hope. You are welcome to submit a poem you have written that applies to one or the other of those subjects, or a favorite poem not written by you, written by someone else. The deadline is tomorrow night because I have to have the order of service submitted to Christine by Thursday morning. Each poem will be followed by an improvisation by our musician, and I look forward to your submissions. You can ask me for my email address.
The amplification gremlins are obviously at work, faithfully on the job. We hope that everyone will come to coffee hour downstairs right after the service. We love to spend time with old friends and get acquainted with new ones. So right after the service, if you go down the stairs and across the hall and down a few other stairs, that's where coffee hour happens, and we do hope that you will come. There's more news about our church community in the newsletter that's emailed to you every Friday. You'll want to be sure to read these announcements so as not to miss any news about what's happening in your church. If you're not receiving the weekly newsletter, just contact Christine in the church office, again, Thursdays and Fridays in the summer, so she can add you to the mailing list. Thursdays and Fridays in the morning is best. If you're watching from home, we encourage you to take a minute now to get a candle or chalice and matches ready so you can join us when we light the chalice here shortly after the service begins. And now, today's service will begin. The opening hymn is number 155 in the gray hymnal. You are welcome to rise in body or in spirit.
Good morning, and thank you all for coming. I'm Susan Nicholson, a member of this church, and very pleased to be the lay leader of this service. Our opening words today are excerpted from a piece written by a Palestinian in Gaza, entitled, "Hunger or Death, Which is More to be Feared?" I received a copy of this piece last month in a mailing from one of the co-founders of Sabeel, a Christian liberation theology center, which I visited in Jerusalem, which I visited in 2008. Can you hear me? Okay. All right. I am at a loss. By God I am, stumbling in disbelief like one struck stunned by shock. How can a world so vast, a world that folds the earth in the blink of an eye, splits the atom and pierces the heaven, fail to save a starving soul? Here in this surreal city, people sit at the mercy of metal frames awaiting coordinates to seal their fate. They eat salt, if they can find any, without bread, chew pain instead of time and oil, and walk in slow, weary steps, not in play, but in exhaustion, not in joy, but in sorrow. They wander like the lost on a road with no sign, like the trapped in a tunnel with no glimmer of light. Hungry, yes, but their hunger is not just in their bellies. It is in their souls, stripped bare, and their hearts stabbed deep. They perish before the bombs reach them, devoured by hunger that arrived first. They die not because death has finally called, but because the world has gone deaf to their cries. They are crushed between the hammer of missiles and the anvil of empty pots, each bearing a burden no mountain could shoulder. A child begging for milk, a mother dreaming of a handful of beans, a grandfather gnawing on what stones might sprout, and a father unraveling at the thought of what meal might shield his children. Will the world explode before he finishes the lentil stew? Or after, when the family wrinkles their noses as usual? So I ask myself, what madness is this? Is this mere famine or a test of the world's humanity? How is death prepared in the kitchens of global conscience? How is hope trapped inside a tiny piece of land with the size of a sardine tin? How do we explain to the world what's happening when after 21 moons it still cannot see? A world that climbs to the moon every hour, traverses galaxies, bends time itself, yet fails to feed a child, guiltless, helpless, nationless, whose only refuge is a mother's hollow bosom. In Gaza, hunger is no mere instinct. It's a war machine, an ordeal of the soul, a moral reckoning. Is starvation kinder than shelling? Is death by hunger gentler than death by shrapnel? I'd nearly swear our Prince of Poets, Ahmed Shawqi, composed his verses for us alone when he lamented. From the war of Albasis to this cruel inflation, it returns like 7 harsh trials. Is there no Joseph among the people to face this, to calculate wisely and see the path rightly? Your servants, Lord, have starved in Egypt. Was it the Nile you gave them, or merely a mirage? In the Unitarian Universalist faith tradition, we enter into worship by the simple ritual of kindling our chalice. As Lucille lights our chalice, if you have a candle or chalice prepared at home, please light it with us now. We take a moment now to affirm the covenant that we share with one another. Newcomers and guests, the words of our affirmation are printed in the order of service if you'd like to read along with us. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. We also light a candle for peace each week, to join our hopes for peace with the hopes of so many others who cannot bear the suffering they see. This week in particular, we think of the Palestinians in Gaza, where, according to the Global Authority on Food, the worst-case scenario of famine is currently playing out. Access to food and water has plummeted to unprecedented levels in recent months, with 1 in 3 individuals now going without food for days at a time, 9 in 10 households resorting to scavenging in garbage for food, and nearly 1,700 shot and killed while simply trying to access food.
For the life and health of this church and all its ministries, the morning offering will now be gratefully received. Blessings on the givers and upon their gifts.
may be seated. I invite us now into a time of soulful reflection, to be followed by silent meditation. As a focus for our reflection, let us consider the closing lines of a sermon given by the Latina Jewish poet Aurora Levins Morales at the First Unitarian Church of Dallas on May 4th of this year. We can't flirt with despair. It's an unaffordable luxury. We need each other close in order to resist its toxic appeal, knowing the alternatives are both dismal and dangerous. We need to tell each other stories that remind us of what we already know in our bones, that we are made for these times, and demanding the impossible is the only realistic choice. Hope is the decision to act every day on what our bones know, to imagine the world we want in such detail that if we get lost, we can always point ourselves back towards it, to choose each other and keep reminding ourselves that if we leave no one behind, we can build it. Hope is a decision to act for the greater good with every cell and synapse, to bring our most joyous, connected, big dreaming selves to each hour of our singular precious lives for the sake of all beings, so that we and the children of our children's children may live.
The reading is Don't Mention the Children by Michael Rosen. It needs just a little bit of background information. In 2014, Israel and Hamas were engaged in a 7-week-long conflict in Gaza that was similar to the current war, which of course has lasted horrifying years rather than weeks. As the case is now, the 2014 conflict involved deadly Israeli airstrikes and a blockade of food and other essential provisions. Over 2,000 Gazan Palestinians were killed or starved, most of them civilians, including children. An Israeli human rights organization then wanted to broadcast on the radio the names of some of the many children who had died. But the Israeli Broadcasting Authority banned the ad, saying that its content was politically controversial. The following is the response of poet Michael Rosen. Don't mention the children. Don't name the dead children. The people must not know the names of the dead children. The names of the children must be hidden. The children must be nameless. The children must leave this world having no names. No one must know the names of the dead children. No one must say the names of the dead children. No one must even think that the children have names. People must understand that it would be dangerous to know the names of the children. The people must be protected from knowing the names of the children. The names of the children could spread like wildfire. The people would not be safe if they knew the names of the children. Don't name the dead children. Don't remember the dead children. Don't think of the dead children. Don't say dead children. So ends the reading.
Thank you, Lucille, for that reading. Thank you, our musicians, for today. Steve Lacey, Genevieve Dion, and Deirdre O'Donoghue. Those of you who know of my 20-year advocacy for Palestinian human rights will not be surprised I was deeply impacted when 3 foreign student activists, Mahmoud Khalil, Rameza Ozturk, and Mohsen Madawi, were snatched off the streets earlier this year because of their pro-Palestinian advocacy. The invitation to lead this service came 2 days after the 3rd student, Mohsen Madawi, was carted away. And I thought, that's what I have to talk about. It will give me a reason to continue reading what I want to read, and a way to connect my anguish with what Israel and the United States are doing in Gaza, with my shock over what's happening to our democracy right here at home, because they are, of course, related. So today, I'm going to be telling you the stories of the 3 students. While Rameza Ozturk was not the first to be taken away, I'm going to start with her story, because it happened so close to home, right here in Somerville, Massachusetts, and because it's the easiest to understand. 2 things before I begin. While I'm a retired attorney, I'm not an expert in constitutional law or immigration law. So what I'm telling you today is my best take on what happened, but I don't claim to be an expert. Second, I have 3 surprises hidden for you in these stories. So listen up, you don't want to miss them. Rameza Ozturk, 30 years old, a Turkish national, a former Fulbright scholar, here legally in the US on an F1 student visa, a doctoral candidate at Tufts University in the field of child study and human development. She was abducted late afternoon on March 25th while she was walking on a street near her residence in Somerville, on her way to break the Ramadan fast by attending a dinner at the Tufts Interfaith Center. How many of you seen the surveillance camera of her abduction? Raise your hands. Good, that's a good group. So you will remember that she was suddenly stopped by a man in, in a hooded sweatshirt who grabs her wrists and takes away her phone. She's been talking to her mother. She screams. 5 other people wearing ordinary clothing surround her, and after putting on masks, put her hands in handcuffs behind her back and 1 on each arm, march her off to an unmarked car. Once alerted, her immigration attorney leapt into action and by 10 that night had filed a habeas corpus petition in the Massachusetts Federal District Court. And within less than an hour, the court had issued an order forbidding the government from taking her out of Massachusetts. But by that time, the government had already moved her, taking her first to New Hampshire and then to Vermont, where she was held in custody until the wee hours of the morning when she was flown 1,300 miles away to a detention center in Louisiana. All this was done in total secrecy, during which time the government attorneys, well aware that the Massachusetts court had ordered that she not be removed from Massachusetts, continued to say they didn't know where she was and to prevent her from contacting her attorneys. During transport, Rameza was not only handcuffed, but shackled at her feet and her belly. And she thought at times that she was being kidnapped and would definitely be killed. Why was the government so interested in getting her to Louisiana? Because of the 12th Circuit courts, that is the most conservative in the country. Now, what was the government's justification for doing this? Rameza was not charged with any crimes and has never been charged or convicted of a crime. The government claimed she was involved in associations that, quote, may undermine U.S. foreign policy by creating a hostile environment for Jewish students and indicating support for a designated terrorist organization, end quote. What was the government's evidence for that claim, that she might undermine foreign policy? An op-ed that she and 3 other students had published the year before in the Tufts student newspaper. That piece criticized the university's dismissive response to student resolutions concerning Israel's human rights violations in Gaza. Now, let this sink in. The only conduct the government produced to support shackling this woman at her hands, feet, and belly, and dragging her off to a prison in Louisiana, is that she co-wrote an op-ed in the student newspaper strongly critical of Israel. An op-ed that the university, in a formal declaration by the president, stated was not in violation of any Tufts policies and was in fact consistent with speech permitted by the Declaration on Freedom of Expression adopted by the university's trustees. How many of you had read her op-ed? Ah, good, all right. Well, it's printed in your bulletin. And since it was the only basis on which she was detained, let's take a quick look at it together. Paragraphs 1 and 2 describe the resolutions passed by the Student Senate, which includes a demand for acknowledgement of the Palestinian genocide and a call for divestment from companies tied to Israel. Paragraph 3 reminds the university of its commitment to critical thinking, even when this may cause discomfort or severe distress. Paragraph 4 refers to a recent ruling by the International Court of Justice that the rights of Palestinians in Gaza to be free from the risk of genocide are at plausible risk of being violated. Paragraph 5 invokes the precedent of the university's historic divestment from apartheid South Africa. Paragraph 6 rejects the administration's characterization of the resolutions as divisive and affirms the equal dignity of all people. Paragraph 7 quotes civil rights champion James Baldwin on the paradox that education causes students to examine the society in which they are educated. And paragraph 8 is a plea to the president and the administration to engage meaningfully instead of dismissively with the student resolutions. Now, correct me if I'm mistaken. You have the evidence in your hands. I don't see here any expression of hostility to Jewish students. Indeed, there's no mention of Jewish students or Jews at all. There's no mention of Hamas, much less support for it, and no incitement to violence. Whatever one's view of the wisdom of these resolutions, this is an educated and restrained defense of them. So what did the Massachusetts District Court do with this case? It transferred the case to the Vermont District Court because that's where Rumeza was held before she was sent off to Louisiana, which issued a 76-page opinion on May 18th. Before both courts, Rumeza was represented by the ACLU, which leapt into action and activated what it calls its habeas strike force to protect Rumeza. The opinion is very refreshing and takes us back to constitutional basics, namely, the First Amendment protection of free speech is, quote, the cornerstone of our vibrant American democracy. This protection belongs not just to U.S. citizens, but to non-citizens residing in the country. Freedom of speech is both an ends and a means. An end because the freedom to think and speak is an unalienable human right. A means because it's indispensable to the discovery and spread of truth. At the core of the cornerstone is political speech. Speech on public issues, quote, occupies the highest rung of the hierarchy of First Amendment values and is entitled to special protection. Was Rumeza's op-ed an example of speech on public issues entitled to special protection? The judge said this was self-evident. Consequently, the judge ruled that Rumeza had presented, quote, serious and viable First Amendment claims requiring urgent review on the merits, and ordered that she be returned to Vermont for further proceedings. When the government immediately appealed the issue to the higher court, the circuit court, mainly on procedural grounds, a 3-judge panel of the circuit court unanimously upheld the lower court decision, commenting that the decision was, quote, careful and thoughtful. 2 days later, the Vermont judge, without waiting for Rumeza to be brought back to Vermont, and visibly upset that the government totally failed to produce on its promise that it would show something else other than the op-ed as grounds for holding her, said, her continued detention, quote, potentially chills the speech of the millions and millions of people in this country who are not citizens. There has been no evidence introduced by the government other than the op-ed. I mean, that literally is the case, end quote. Rumeza was released on bail on May 9 after a detention of 6 weeks. When the government demanded that she be fitted with an ankle monitor, the judge refused. The name of this Vermont district court judge who wrote so clearly to take us back to constitutional basics? William K. Sessions III. William K. Sessions III is one of the founding members of the Middlebury, Vermont UU Church. That's your first surprise. All right, let's take a deep breath. And I'll have a little water. Mahmoud Khalil, 30 years old, born in a Palestinian refugee camp in Syria. Graduate student at Columbia in International and Public Affairs, married to a U.S. citizen and a lawful permanent resident of the U.S. on a green card, which is really a superior status to Rameza's status. She was on a student visa. She can stay here as long as she's a student, but Mahmoud is entitled to stay as long as he wants to. He was abducted on March 8th. Like Rameza, he was not charged with any crime, nor had he ever been convicted of one. Like her, he was handcuffed, immediately taken out of state, in his case to New Jersey, and then flown to a detention center in Louisiana, again, all in secret. As with her, his attorneys, including the ACLU and the Center for Constitutional Rights, quickly protected him by filing a habeas corpus petition. Unlike Rameza, his involvement in Palestinian advocacy extends far beyond writing a single op-ed. As most of you probably know, he was a spokesperson for the Columbia student protests against Israel's assault on Gaza. Because he was regarded by fellow protesters as principled, trustworthy, and welcoming to everyone, including the many Jewish students involved in the protests, they chose him to represent them in their negotiations with the administration. As he stated in a 2024 CNN interview, quote, "I believe that the liberation of the Palestinian people and the Jewish people are intertwined and go hand by hand, and you cannot achieve one without the other. Anti-Semitism and any form of racism has no place on campus and in this movement." While Trump described him as, quote, "a radical foreign pro-Hamas student," end quote, and bragged that his arrest was the first of many to come, the government never introduced any evidence linking him to Hamas. Well, what was the basis then for detaining him? The United States Immigration and Naturalization Law sets out a number of grounds on which non-citizens can be deported, one of which is called the foreign policy provision. That provision reads, quote, "An alien whose presence or activities in the U.S. the Secretary of State has reasonable grounds to believe would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences is deportable." Let me read that again. An alien whose presence or activities in the United States the Secretary of State has reasonable grounds to believe would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences is deportable. You don't have to be a lawyer to realize there's something really amiss with this provision. It seems to give a single individual, the Secretary of State, what is apparently unfettered discretion to decide who and who is not deportable. True, the Secretary must believe there are potentially serious foreign policy consequences, but what does potentially mean? More likely than not, or not likely, but merely a possibility? And during what time frame might this possibility play out? In the imminent future, or just maybe possibly sometime in the many years to come? Note that the person doesn't have to actually do anything to trigger this provision, much less do anything criminal. It's enough if the Secretary believes the person's mere presence in the United States adversely, potentially, sometime, maybe, could affect foreign policy. But how could somebody harm foreign policy simply by existing here? Well, you might say, at least the Secretary's belief has to be reasonable. But who is to judge reasonableness? Since it's the role of the Secretary to oversee U.S. foreign policy, the Secretary arguably has the final say as to what could impact it. And indeed, that's the position taken by the government. The government views the Secretary's determination as to who is deportable under the foreign policy provision as unreviewable. So the Secretary says, this person's got to go, and that's it. It should come as no surprise, then, that the sole federal district court to consider the constitutionality of this provision found it to be unconstitutionally void for vagueness. In a 1996 decision, a New Jersey federal district court judge characterized the provision as, quote, a breathtaking departure from well-established precedent, end quote. The provision, the judge says, provides absolutely no notice to aliens as to what they need to avoid so as not to be deported, and no standards to constrain the Secretary from unreasonable, discriminatory, and arbitrary action. As such, she held, that provision subjects aliens to deprivation of their liberty without due process of law, a violation of a right guaranteed to both citizens and non-citizens under the Fifth Amendment. The name of the judge is Marianne Trump Berry. That's right, you heard that right. Marianne Trump Berry, Donald's older sister, now deceased. So Donald's older sister struck down as patently unconstitutional the provision he now relies upon to round up student activists for deportation. Unfortunately, Big Sister's decision was subsequently overturned on procedural grounds, and it had to start all over again, which it did. That was your second surprise, by the way. Barely 2 weeks after Mahmoud's abduction, over 150 immigration lawyers filed an amicus brief on his behalf based on a review of over 11 million immigration detention cases. The amicus brief made two main points. One, the foreign policy provision is unconstitutional for vagueness. And two, reliance on it to deport a lawful permanent resident solely for political speech is unprecedented in the history of the provision. Finally, on May 28th, in a 106-page decision, the New Jersey federal court judge ruled that Mahmoud was likely to prevail on his First Amendment claims and that he should be released. But I do want to mention an interesting twist here. In a 3-paragraph written declaration explaining why Mahmoud was deportable under the foreign policy provision, Rubio, Secretary of State Rubio, stated that his protest activities fostered, quote, a hostile environment for Jewish students in the United States and undermined efforts to protect Jewish students from harassment and violence in the United States. But the judge said, foreign policy, that refers to a country's interaction with other countries. And Rubio's declaration says nothing about any country other than America. Thus, the judge said there's a dramatic misfit between the provision under which he was deported and the actual circumstances. All right, this will be much briefer. Mohsen Madawi, 34 years old, born and raised in a Palestinian refugee camp in the occupied West Bank. Lawful permanent resident of the U.S. for the past 10 years and was in the formal process of becoming a U.S. citizen. Mohsen was the last to be abducted on April 14th. Oh, I should mention, with Mahmoud Khalil, he had co-founded the Palestinian Student Union at Columbia, and he was active in the Columbia protests. The circumstances of his abduction are extraordinary, as he was seized in Vermont during a scheduled interview that he believed was the final stage of his process for becoming a U.S. citizen. Once he'd answered all the interviewer's questions correctly and passed the citizenship test, he was asked to sign a document affirming he was willing to take the oath of allegiance to the United States. Once he signed, the interviewer mysteriously left the room. Then 3 masked Homeland Security agents entered and, joined by 2 more agents, shackled him and took him away in an unmarked car. The agents had a one-way ticket to Louisiana printed up for him, but they missed the plane at the Burlington airport, and that enabled his attorneys to file a habeas corpus petition in Vermont, where Judge William Sessions, remember him, immediately issued an order prohibiting the government from taking him out of Vermont. From here on in, the themes are familiar, so I won't rehearse them, just to say that he was quickly released. I think it was just a 2-week detention. But there is something I want to say about him, because there's something special about him. After he was released, he said, "For anyone who is doubting justice, this is a light of hope and faith in the justice system in America. We are witnessing the fight for justice in America, which means a true democracy, and the fight for justice for Palestinians, which means that both liberations are interconnected, because no one of us is free until all of us are free." And the love that he has inspired is quite remarkable, starting with the judge's comment on having received over 125 letters of support from professors, neighbors, fellow students, and others who knew him well. Quote, "A striking number from Jewish colleagues and professors involved in the study of history and the culture of Israel and Judaism." A letter of support I found, I was amazed by this, by 206 Israeli citizens in the United States, attesting to his dedication to cooperation and dialogue between Palestinians and Israelis, several commenting that working with Mohsen, quote, "has been the most valuable experience in our time at Columbia University." Letters of support signed by members of state and national Buddhist organizations. Mohsen reported experiencing anger and grief during the Israeli occupation where he was in the West Bank, and turning to Buddhism for help in transmuting those emotions into forgiveness and love and a commitment to nonviolence. A statement by the minister of the Vermont church, where a portrait of Mohsen hangs on the walls, quote, "He's exactly the kind of person we want in our community, not just our congregation, but the wider community. He's caring, he's compassionate, he's dedicated to peaceful resolution to conflicts at all levels." The church on which Mohsen's portrait hangs, the First Universalist Church of Heartland, Vermont, which Mohsen joined shortly after arriving in the U.S., and which he describes as very helpful in his healing. In our congregation today is a good friend of mine, another Vermont UU minister, who can attest to the widespread community affection for Mohsen. In the final paragraph of his opinion, the judge wrote, "Mohsen's release would, quote, benefit the community which appears to deeply cherish and value him." Now, what can we draw from all of this? That what is alleged to be anti-Semitism today may rather be opposition to war crimes and genocide. And we can also draw inspiration. Inspiration from the ACLU, which in all 3 cases quickly activated its habeas strike force. Inspiration from the over 150 immigration lawyers who reviewed 11 million immigration cases to come up with basic tenets. Inspiration from the principled and well-reasoned and careful federal court decisions which stood firm on constitutional basics, and from the courts of appeals which upheld these lower court decisions, and from the outpouring of support from friends and colleagues and community members of the 3 students. Perhaps most of all, we can draw inspiration from the courage of the 3 students themselves. It was March of last year when Mermeza Ozturk co-wrote the op-ed calling upon the president of Tufts to recognize the genocide in Gaza. Within the last month, an op-ed published in the New York Times by an Israeli genocide scholar, 2 of Israel's own leading human rights organizations, the head of J Street, a U.S. pro-Israel liberal organization, and just last Tuesday, the Unitarian Universalist Association have all acknowledged the appropriateness of the term genocide to describe what is happening in Gaza. Would this be happening today without the courage of the 3 students who refused to look away? I think not. Let us draw inspiration then from these 3 stories, and let us remember, in the words of the UUA poster now up on Instagram, love is not silent in the face of genocide. May it be so. I think I forgot to announce a hymn. Where is this? Yes, our closing hymn is 95 in the gray hymnal. Please be seated. The closing stanzas of a poem entitled "The Red Sea" by Aurora Levins Morales, I think are appropriate here. This time we're tied at the ankles. We cannot cross until we carry each other. All of us refugees, all of us prophets. No more taking turns on history's wheel, trying to collect old debts no one can pay. The sea will not open that way. This time, that country is what we promise each other. Our rage, pressed cheek to cheek, until tears flood the space between, until there are no enemies left. Because this time, no one will be left to drown, and all of us must be chosen. This time, it's all of us or none. Love be with you till we meet again. May its counsels guide uphold you. In its arms securely hold you. Love be with you till we meet again. And now I invite those of you at home to hold up your candle, and together we will blow them out as we say the words to extinguish our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. May you go in peace and return in love. Coffee downstairs.